And here we go. So welcome to Inside the Artist Studio. Yay. So are you all my favorite procrastinators? Because this is the last one of the year. Did you know that? Of course you knew that. Yeah. So with me, Diana Woods, David Camrosell, and Elsa Soroka. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome. So are we all ready for the holiday fandango?
Yeah.
Well, as
I
ready
am.
as I'll ever be.
Let's get it going.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? Let's just dive right in. And because this is not a democracy, I make all the decisions here. Elsa Soroka, you're up to bat, my friends. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Mm.
So I love David Camrosell when we were gearing up, noticed how neat and clean your studio is. What is
you're
up with that?
you're seeing a portion of it. This is my neat wall right here.
Yeah.
It's not all like that.
Yeah.
But I am kind of weird about coming in, and it's almost like before you cook, I'm one of those people that has to clean my surfaces and have it all organized before. Sorry, do you hear some loud sound of heat coming on?
I do not.
Okay, good.
Do not.
Good.
No,
Okay.
I think you're good. I'm glad you have heat though. That's
yes.
Yes. No, I am that person too. I definitely I always clean up the kitchen before I start to cook. It's just a weird thing. I thought I was the only one who did it, but no, you do too. So that's
right. Even the floor, like if I'm barefoot or it's like, ugh, I can't stand like standing on crumbs.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do that a bit in my studio too, especially when I'm procrastinating.
Yeah. See, that's what I thought. I thought this was, you were like struggling. This looks like a job when you're struggling with a painting or you just can't get started. You're like, I'm going to go to the hardware store.
Well, I saw the idea on Instagram, an artist did it, and because I have all these random tubes of color that it's like my inventory. I don't know what I have. So, this way I can see what I actually have. And when I get lazy and I grab some color that's not really the color I want, I may do that. So this way it's like, no. These are your reds, these are your blues, whatever it is. So I can visually see it.
Oh, wow. I love that. Okay, so I'm going to dive in and do a screen share, and everybody who has come on the Zoom today, welcome and thank you. Please keep your video and your microphone on mute, keep your video off. And if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and I will read them to our artists. So Elsa, let's take a look at what you have. I love this group of work that you've brought in. And you know what, I'm going to start with, this is my favorite one, Passengers, which I know I probably shouldn't say I have a favorite, but this is actually, I adore this. And I fully admit that sometimes when I fall in love with a painting, it's just because of this place that I am in my life. And, somehow kind of lately feeling maybe a little adrift. And so I just love this sweet cow in there, and he's got a little bird riding along with him. What would you talk about where this idea came from, or where your ideas do come from?
It's been this journey of trying to actually figure out, well, why I paint cows this was like from the start, it was sort of an experimental subject that just evolved. I started with these cow faces up close, and then that evolved into these more little narrative, little
Mhm.
scenarios, and I am trying to still figure out why it's like water and in these boats, or even, you know, a lot of my cows are laying down.
Mhm.
And I think for me, it's like, I'm one of these people that seeks out quiet spots. And I'm a bit sensitive to like loud music and loud sounds. And, you know, I'm always trying to find this like peaceful place. And I think that's why they're usually in these types of settings. It's like, this is like me maybe seeking this peaceful life.
Mhm.
So when I look at this, I feel a sense of peace, and you know, not necessarily adrift. I mean, I can see that would be maybe something you would think of, but I see a sense, I see calm
Yeah.
in the face of the cow. And you know, it brings my blood pressure down.
Oh, for sure. No, and I always talk about like when people come into an art exhibit, I love hearing what how they're responding and what they think things mean, because I mean, I'm fully aware in myself, this is what I'm going through and this is what I'm responding to because of it. And maybe at a different time, it would be something else. But it's sort of like the calm of this, and I don't see it as, it doesn't strike me as scary or any, because even this cow should capsize this little tiny boat, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, so it's almost like, you know what, you can do the impossible too. And maybe it's just bliss to be,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
yeah.
And the surrealism, I mean, so, you know, it's like, I don't want my paintings to be too realistic. That's really not my intention. I like them to be a little awkward and surreal. And you know what? I don't think I've ever mentioned it in an interview. Maybe I've mentioned how my childhood with like diving into these real graphic children's books and this imagery was, you know, it was a simple life. That's what we had. It was like, we didn't have much else than our imagination. And there is this book, and I have it. It was the Pinocchio book. I'm going to show you this old, and this is the book that we grew up with. It has like tape all over the side. And if you look at it, it's like these images are like burnt in my mind from a
Wow.
really young age. And I don't know, there's something about this that comes back to me.
Yeah.
And even for like all like my siblings too, this was the Carlo Collodi antique book. But there's something in my deep subconscious that goes on there.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of wonderful to know. I don't think you've ever said that before, but that makes a lot of sense. That I think it always sort of surprises me. This is such an interesting group, I just realized today, because all of you are kind of dabbling with surrealism in a sense. And even dabbling might be too light of a word for it. Embracing is more the word. Oh, what a great happenstance. None of you are real literalists with what you're doing. So talk about this one, La Vie, right? The life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This was definitely more going on in this piece, and I really wanted to incorporate more pattern and layers of finer, like thinner layers of paint and a softer brush, because actually I have been changing my tools a little bit. and coming in with, you know, more glazing layers. And so it's a process of putting something down and coming in again and letting things be loose, but this what am I trying to say? Harmony in it also with shapes and colors.
Yeah.
I've really been trying to work on that more. So this actually, it was a really fun piece because I let some things go as in knowing when I'm painting, it's like, you know what, it's paint. And I'm going to put this down and come over it again with something else. And there's this total freedom in that. And that's really what I like doing most.
Well, because there's some good drippy paint in here too, you know, that just feels like you allowed things to just happen. So it does have that sense. So here's this cow relaxing, reclining on the divan and or on the chaise and just really content. And it's so, I mean, your work always has this sense of humor to it, this just sort of lightheartedness, even though I've had a number of conversations with you, and I think you're a really serious person. So how does this come out in your work? I mean, do I have that right?
You know what? I'm not that serious. I think I come off as being that way, but I can be really silly.
Yeah.
And goofy. And you just have to get me to know me better.
Yeah. So you're always nervous when you're talking to me. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah, I think the people that really know me, it's like I have sort of a quirky something going on in my head. But again, this is like, so what I do with these is I will choose these backgrounds that pull in, that really like, it's difficult to find these things that go together, like to find that, because I'm doing sort of a cut and paste.
Right.
And it takes a while to want to actually commit to painting something to have it mesh together well.
You know, and I think it's interesting when you say cut and paste, because when I've been in your studio, that's quite literally what you're doing. Like you're taking pieces out of magazines and cutting them and just arranging them almost like on a, you know, on a scrapbook.
Yeah, and there's something really, you know, tactile and wonderful about that. I could do this and, you know, learn Photoshop better. But there's something about the process of feeling it in the paper and putting it together and the rawness of that I kind of enjoy.
Yeah. Tell us about these two. They're so sweet. And all of your paintings, actually, all three of you, I keep saying this, but it's so true this year, especially for some reason, everything looks better in person. It just is, especially when we're talking a scale like these three that we were just looking at. But tell us about these two sweet cows.
These are just, you know, again, the main thing that the number one thing I think that I choose for my subjects are these sweet faces, and also the emotion in their faces, and so I just feel it. And you know, some cows are more that way in their expression than others, and I loved this sort of black and white pattern that's going through this, and the connection between the two that's almost
yeah,
I guess in a way more of an abstract if you're really squinting and looking at it.
Yeah,
I liked that. That was my intention in this one, is with the bigger shapes and the darks and the lights with their bodies together.
And I'm going to show these two little ones. So you know, I think it's definitely something that I've always wondered. And I know we started off where you were saying, I don't know why cows, but really it could have been cats or porcupines or
Sure.
Is there something about, like, there must be something about cows that just, they are calm.
I
And
think
they're,
it was just my, my muse for a long time. And then I just learned to paint with them. Like the more that I learned from early on painting, I don't know. I mean, I wonder if it's sort of also the black and white quality of a lot of them and I actually paint a lot of faces that are white, and there's more contrast between the eyes and the body color than the browns or just a black cow, because I choose to want to see these differences between the values, the colors.
yeah. Okay, so, hang on, I'm gonna stop share and mute. Somebody is not muted here. There we go. Mute, okay. Okay, so, I just want to remind everybody, please stay on mute and keep your video off if you wouldn't mind. And if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. All right, Elsa. So hang tight. I am going to go over to David Camerzel, and we will come back to you, though. Don't worry. Don't go anywhere. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good. I'm doing just fine. You and I have had a number of conversations of late, and I think the two of us this is just a season of change for both of us, and it's not your fault or my fault, of course, that we're both going through stuff, but it's interesting how it comes out in your art. And for me, I think in what, just like looking at Elsa's piece and seeing my kind of things reflected in it, and in your work and Diana's, and just kind of a lot of stuff, and trying to be aware of that, but yeah, there's a piece in particular that I want to dive into, and you know what, why don't we do that? Because when you brought your work in, right away, we started talking about this piece, The Onset. And I wonder if would you just talk about this a little bit? And
yeah, sure.
Yeah, some of the subconscious stuff going on with it for you.
Well, some of the changes that you were referring to is my kid has left the house and gone off to college. So that's a big transition that
Right.
and it was a lot more of an emotional transition than I was expecting. So I was a little caught off guard for that.
Yeah.
I never thought it would be such a heart-wrenching, bittersweet kind of thing. But I always start off with an image that I'm drawn to. In this case, it was this cowgirl on her horse, and she's hard charging and ready to venture off into who knows where. But then I always want to do something different with the background and make it a more idealized, glamorized image. And I had just come back from seeing Madam X, who had told me that I had a spirit bird of crows. And I thought, crows? Why can't I be like an eagle or a hawk or maybe an owl or something really cool? And, crows have this, I don't know, this kind of macabre sense to them. And, you see them picking at disgusting things in the street. And
They're
I wasn't really,
yeah.
right. So I wasn't really too happy about hearing that the crow was my spirit animal.
Who told you that was a spirit animal?
Well, I went to have a reading, and I don't want to say her name, so I'm just going to call her Madam X. So, and she said my spirit animal was a lion, so I thought that was cool. I thought she was right on for that one. Yeah, but I was a little disappointed in the crow thing. So I
Huh.
started reading about crows just to see if I could, glean something about their personalities. And I was actually surprised at all of the folklore and symbolism that has been attributed to crows, and especially with Native American cultures. And they're very inquisitive birds. They're highly intelligent. They're playful. They're inquisitive. I've seen videos of them sliding down a roof of snow, and then flying back up to the top and sliding down again. I've
Wow.
seen them solve puzzles to get a certain treat. I've seen stories where people have left presents like food for crows for them to come and eat, and the crows will actually come back and grant this person a present, and they
Oh,
come back on numerous occasions and bring them presents. So they're actually pretty remarkable. And one of the things that they attribute to them is this ushering in of a new era or a transition. And so that's what I thought was like the important part to this, is this transitioning. So the onset is kind of another word for a transition or beginning of a new era, a new transition. That's not
Yeah.
right. A new thing.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so yeah, I
It-
was very happy the way this piece came out.
Oh, it's just wonderful. Hey, will you talk about where you get these the images, the subjects?
Well, I search for archives, really. I mean, I start with old photos. And I started doing this just as a source of reference because I'm a slave to the photo. I can't just like make up stuff and paint it. I need to look at something.
Yeah.
And I just found these old photos of cowboys kind of interesting and intriguing. And I would go through libraries and, different historical records and find things. And they would typically be copyright free too. So that was something else I was concerned with. And yeah, so I would just kind of go from there. And this is another one where I do this a lot, where I will take a body from one subject. A lot of the old photos aren't that great. They have long exposures and the people are kind of expressionless and the faces aren't that interesting. So I'll Photoshop a different face onto the body, which is what I did here.
Yeah.
And if you'll scroll down a little bit, please. When I
Yeah.
was painting this, and I didn't really know, I put the designs together with usually no real thought or subject in mind, no real thing that I'm trying to say other than an arrangement of the designs and the elements and wanting them all to work together, kind of as Elsa was talking about in her piece. I wanted all of these designs to work. And then when I'm getting close to being done, I noticed that this cowgirl had butterflies on her boots.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm starting to, what's some of the symbolism behind butterflies? Searching for a title, what's kind of interesting. And one thing that came up was the butterfly effect, which I think is a fascinating concept, which is
Yes.
some
Talk about
small,
that concept. Talk about that concept. If
yeah,
people don't
there's like
know
a
it.
very small thing that you do or happens, and it creates this downstream effect, kind of an avalanche of effects, so that something very large and major happens at the end of all of this. So for example, I was watching a video where they had reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone Park.
Right.
And by doing so, months and maybe a couple years later, they had changed the course of a river. By
Mhm.
introducing wolves, the course of a river had changed. So that's kind of an example of a butterfly effect. And
And
I won't get in. Sorry, go ahead.
that is I have seen that video as well, and I think it's really worth looking at, because it's exactly what you're talking about. Like, you do one small thing, we remove wolves from an area, and then their prey gets to flourish and destroys things, and then it does change the course of rivers and a whole landscape, and put them back in, and the wolves control. So it's sort of a thing in our lives too, isn't it? That
Right.
Yeah.
And by doing one small thing in your life sort of sets off a chain reaction of events that, who knows what could have happened, at the end of that.
Right.
And for me, painting has been sort of that way too, where I took it on professionally 10 years ago, just as kind of a personal thing. But the butterfly effect of all of that is how other people have reacted to my pieces. And I remember doing a piece that it was of they call them Adelitas, which is the Mexican revolutionary women. And she was armed to the teeth with all of her guns and ammo. And this woman bought it because she identified with the warrior woman in her. And that was something that really appealed to her at that moment, much like this guy here. And so it affects people in ways that I hadn't really thought of or expected. So it's kind of cool.
That has gotta be a fun thing for an artist. I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know sometimes it's nerve-wracking when you all are at an opening and somebody doesn't know you're the artist, and they're like, I don't really like this. Let's,
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, isn't it like people want to interact, and they want to tell you what they're getting off of the work, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, and without getting into this too much, if you've ever read the prologue to Henry V, Shakespeare, he talks about the connection between what's going on in the play and the audience, and he needs the audience to kind of fill in the blanks to help make the play work. And I never really thought about that in terms of art before, and music too, and paintings as well. But I mean, you do need that relationship between the viewer and the piece. Otherwise, if nobody sees it, what real value is it? If nobody cares for it, or it doesn't affect somebody, then does it have any value? I'm not sure, but I think you really need that component. You need the audience to complete the vision.
I made a note of that. I'm going to look that up. I had not read that, but it's 100% true, right?
Yeah. He talks about needing to call on your imaginary forces, and that line just gives me the chills.
Yeah. Talk about Emiliano, and this is something I will say, when I first saw your work, and I was keeping an eye on your work, because like you said, you were moving from illustration and getting away from a daily grind of that to switching over to fine art. And I was really intrigued with it. And then you started hitting on just everything kind of clicked together. And I think this one is such a good, to use the word again, illustration of how you've melded all of these things. So here's this like grand story, almost like a play, right? With this backdrop and this character, and the other one that we're going to just look at next, emerging out of the backdrop. And it's just sort of this, almost like he's stepping out of history, or, being pulled back into it or something. But tell us about this piece.
Well, this piece is Emiliano Zapata, at least his face is, but the body is of a different Mexican revolutionary figure.
Mm-hmm.
And I just was drawn to the image, especially all of his guns and his clothing and his wardrobe. It was just really an interesting image for me. But again, the face was sort of boring, but the Emiliano, who was one of the leaders of the Mexican Revolutionary, his face was so strong and powerful, and I was able to Photoshop them together. And then I was just looking for an interesting background to go with it. And like we said, not all backgrounds will work with all images, and it takes me quite a while to find something that I think works and is interesting. And I just love how this background sort of flows with him. You know, you
Mhm.
can see where that arc around his shoulder is sort of similar. It kind of echoes the arc and the design of the flowers. And I don't know, I just thought it all worked together really well, especially around his hat too. You can see around his
Yes.
sombrero, the background sort of echoes that. And that was just sort of a happy happenstance that it all sort of whipped together like that. So
Well, and these are
pretty
these fun, like, I think these really fun choices that you all make as artists, but his hat is not the typical sombrero straw hat color either. So what's the intention of that? Because it almost gives him sort of like there's a cloud over him, or there's a halo, or there's, you know,
Yeah, it's just really a color choice. You know, I'm trying to make all of these colors play and work well together. And
yeah,
it's not like there's a priority. Not everything can be the star. You know, I wanted his face and maybe his scarf to kind of be the focal point, and then everything else has to be of a secondary nature. It has to be the supporting cast and not part of the lead.
right.
So I'm always struggling with that, you know, trying to balance those colors so that one doesn't take too much precedence over another.
Yeah. And so same here too with
Yeah,
I love how these two pieces hang together. Um,
yeah.
so I hope somebody buys both of them together, because I think they'd be really fun to have.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. They do work well together.
tell us about Max Stash.
This is another vintage photo. This is probably late 1800s. I have no idea who this guy is. I did not change really anything about him other than I just made up the colors in his outfit and so on. And I was always intrigued with this idea of running the design through a part of the figure. And so I just kind of made just a sort of a broad color for his shirt so that the pattern could be seen through there. And again, looking for a title, nothing was really coming to mind. And so it's just sort of a bad play on words of mustache for Mac Stash is his name.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, it works
yeah.
really well. Hey, will you tell me about this little band of color down here?
Yeah, you know, I always sort of end up in the same sort of color place, and I feel like it gets a little monotonous with the colors, and I'm always looking for opportunities to bring in color. And I felt like this piece really needed something, and so I brought in this kind of secondary design, and sort of as a contrast to this more ornate floral design. I had something very geometric going on there with brighter colors. So just to kind of counterbalance all the rest of the color scheme and the more floral type design.
Wow.
I
Yeah,
spent a lot of time painting and repainting those colors too.
oh, you did.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. You
Mhm.
know, okay, and this is kind of funny, but even moving these paintings around the gallery for the week when we're trying to decide where everything's going to go, and then hanging them and adjusting, this is the first time I noticed that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you've probably been busy with you have like
Well, yeah, for
300 paintings
sure.
to look
But
at.
yeah, but no, it's kind of interesting that, and your work is hanging in this spot that I walk by 1,000 times a day, you know, when I'm in the gallery. And so now I'm going to look for it, because seeing it up this close and magnified, it's like, oh wow, what a
Yeah,
great choice as an artist to
yeah.
put
Well,
that.
I wanted like a little splash of color there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it really works. That is really cool.
Thank you.
All right, David, hang out. I'm gonna switch over to Diana. Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Well, I'm doing just fine. I love like getting to see what you're working on next.
Yeah, I've got a bear behind me that's just in the beginning
Wow.
stages. So yeah, and I've got a few other pieces that
Oh,
I'm finishing up.
wow. Oh, how lovely. Is
Thank-
that a commission behind you, the girl with the two horses?
No, that's for a show coming up in March.
Oh
And
my
that's
God.
actually me as a young girl. And I don't
Really?
usually paint people, but it's been really fun to try. I really
Really?
enjoyed it. And those are my two horses.
Yeah. Wow. 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 Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm gonna dive into a screen share with you too.
Okay.
But let me see. I think this is something that you and I share with David is this time of transition as well. Um, yeah, I know you've got a lot going on and a lot of kind of big changes happening in your world. And how is that? I'm just going to give us sort of a big overview of the pieces that we have, but how do you think that's playing out in your work? Because I know David, that was sort of it kind of filtered in without him realizing that it was kind of coming into his imagery. But how about you?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it's a painting for me is an escape. And it's a time for me to totally, go into this other realm of imagination. And it's so these pieces are very contemplative actually.
Mhm.
um, and I like to explore animals' inner worlds. And so as I'm going through my changes in my life and getting more introspective, I think my animals are getting more introspective.
Yeah.
Bruno here is dreaming of spring. Does a bear dream when he's hibernating in the winter? I think so.
That's a lot of time of sleeping. You'd have to have something going on, right?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
um yeah, so I think my work is becoming more and more introspective and also more, I don't know, I'm exploring myth and folklore and
Yeah.
the storytelling.
And Bruno has been a character over the
Oh,
years in your work.
he sure has. He's followed me. My grandfather told me the most wonderful stories of Bruno
I
and
was
his
just gonna
adaptation.
ask. Yeah.
Yes. And so since I was a child, um, he would tell us these wonderful stories, and we all believed that Bruno was real, and Bruno would save him from all these horrible fates. So Bruno is also kind of a figure of, a protector. And also bears kind of represent wisdom and protection. And so I think there's a lot of that coming into play, like as a guiding animal guide in a way.
Yeah. And even though there's all this, it's almost like stained glass, kaleidoscope sort of thing happening behind a number of these works now. But even though that's happening, this bear and his expression and the way he's just sort of almost kind of standing up into your painting, it just still feels really like a story that you're about to start telling us.
Yeah, I gravitate toward narrative, and I before I start a piece, I have kind of an idea of the story I want to tell.
Oh,
And yeah, and it
is
just
there a story was there a story with this one?
just that, I was picturing Bruno hibernating for months on end, and I was like, well, do animals dream? And there was this recent study done, a scientific study done on wolf spiders, and they actually found that they were dreaming. They moved their little leg
Really?
and their eyes and everything. And they found that wolf spiders dream. So I was like, well, I could just picture Bruno in this dark cavernous, this cave, and dreaming of the bright colors and the joy of spring. And it's probably very symbolic of my life, and dreaming of better days to come, and spring around the corner. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And I wanted to put this one with Bruno. This piece just makes me smile every time I look at it, because it's sort of it's sort of like he crashed your painting, like just poked his head in, and yeah. And
Yeah.
What's so wonderful too, Diana, is I love this evolution of the surfaces of your work as well. Just like as Elsa was saying, of not maybe being in such control of the drips and the happy accidents too, your surfaces as well seem like you're allowing more of that to come through.
I think I am. I'm really enjoying experimenting, and I use this big scraper, and I just go wild on my abstract expressionistic backgrounds, and I allow, the dripping and, big chunks of paint, and then I come back in, and I've been kind of contrasting that with some hard edge lines as well. And that's been kind of interesting for me to contrast.
Yeah. And then put the animals in too, which I think are just forever a part of your work. You say you don't usually paint the figure, but the way you paint animals, it just has this sort of anthropomorphic sensibility about it, like Solace too. This one is just so sweet.
That piece just is so comforting to me. And I love to see how horses relate to one another, and how, as herd animals, they're so connected to each other. And I just wanted that. And that is kind of autobiographical as well. I mean, it's like a self-portrait with me and my husband. And it's just so beautiful. I love the quality of light and just the connection to one another.
Sometimes when I hear artists talk about their work, I think it must be hard to let some of these go.
Yeah. Some of them I get very attached to, and I do keep some.
You do.
But rarely.
Yeah.
Now this piece, I love the playfulness of this piece, and I have a doe that visits me regularly at my house. And I also have a lot of magpies, and I raised a magpie actually.
You did?
Baby, yes, I did. And I love, by the way, David, I love crows. I'm a big crow person. And
I gotta tell you, I am too. And magpies, and I know they're such a nuisance. They're just a pain in the ass, and I love them.
I know, they're just characters.
They are characters.
They're loud, and they're raucous, and they're playful, and and I love how animals have interspecies relationships. So that's one of the themes of a lot of my work, is showing how animals have friends that are other species. They have relationships. Some of them are just symbiotic, but a lot of them are just flat out friendships. And I love that.
So tell me about something with this painting in particular, because I think it's a little bit easier to see, but you have this extremely abstract background that, honestly, if you were looking at Monet's water lilies, when you're surrounded, this could be a section of Monet's water lilies. And then there are these shapes that you've put on top of it. And then the birds and the doe, another layer. And how are these paintings emerging?
Well, the very first step I did was I had a lot of layers of paint on my board, and I used a sander. And I came up with the most beautiful, I mean, there's some incredible textures coming through, and I love excavating on my
Uh-huh.
paintings, and that's why I paint on board so I can really dig in. And I had so much fun seeing what was coming through. And then I went to the next step of adding a contrast of what is the opposite of really loose, drippy, expressionistic work. And the opposite is hard edged lines. And I thought, well, let's just see how that feels. So I, it's a process of just feeling what's working, what's peeking through. And
Yeah,
and
this
then
is, it's just such to me, this painting of the whole suite of your pieces feels like this kind of a leap forward in what you're trying to accomplish on a canvas, basically.
I feel it is too. I feel like it was a huge step for me, huge step forward. It almost has an Asian quality to it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just it was really, really fun and really fulfilling for me to find these different experiments and work through them. And yeah, it came together. I was very happy with it.
Does this one have a backstory to it?
Just the dough is like this. She comes every day to visit me, and I just love her. And she comes right up into my yard, and she had 2 babies this year, by the way, and they're just adorable. And the magpies, I just love magpies, so I decided I would have her with the magpies. And I wanted to tell the story of how, there are relationships between,
Yeah.
animals and how they relate to us. I mean, I feel like when I see her, I go into kind of a state of awe and wonder.
Yeah.
And, as humans, we're so busy all the time. We're distracted, we're loud, we're always, working, going here or there. And whenever I walk outside and I see her, it's like everything stops and I just feel so calm. And I wanted to kind of bring that to the viewer of this sense of awe and wonder.
Well, you succeed in this painting, and I guess to me, part of this change or move forward, in particular with that painting, and really with all of these, is there was always a sense of whimsy. These have a more of a grounded, it's almost like that you are a medium for what's kind of coming out. Like, I know you come with a concept, but just what we're seeing with these backdrops, like Little Book Cliff's Mustang, with this fun surface, again, like you coming in with the more hard-edged design work. And then here's this horse. It just feels like things have changed with your work. When we were hanging these on the wall, I just remember thinking, I gotta ask about that.
Yeah, I think it might be because I'm working all the time. I'm painting consistently. And I felt a huge growth this year because of just flat out just painting all the time. And I just feel like it's coming through. And this particular piece, this is a horse that I know very well. He came off the Book Cliffs, and he was adopted by this teenage girl who rides dressage and jumps him. And
Wow.
he's just this amazing, noble creature. And I painted him before. I love him. And
Yeah, Mustang?
yeah, so those are the freeze marks on his neck, which show they tattoo the horses when they come in off the range, and that will tell you it's you know, kind of abstract symbols there, but those are actually freeze marks that show you where he's born, when he was born, and yeah, and so they
Hmm.
know exactly where he's come from and how old he is.
It's been interesting how many artists I've talked to lately who are getting more involved in the Mustangs. And it can be kind of a controversy because they are kind of rounding them up and killing some of them
Yeah.
off. And I know on the surface that just sounds awful, but it's kind of even worse if you let them starve because there's not enough food for them too, is my understanding. It's just
It's Yeah, it's
hard.
controversial. I think that I'm pretty involved too. And I think that if they got into more of a, you know, a program where they were giving them uh, birth control,
Yeah,
they use darts. And I think that would really help with the major problem.
right.
Uh,
The
and
overpopulation. Yeah.
And some of the wild horse areas do utilize that program more than others. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's really sad. You know,
Yeah.
I've been on a roundup and it's not pretty. I was all excited thinking it was going to be very, you know, really interesting, and it's pretty brutal because they use helicopters and
Mhm. And they're
yeah,
pretty scared and
yeah. Some of them
yeah.
die and the young ones get trampled. It's So, yeah, but I visit the wild horse herd up here quite often.
Yeah. Wow. It's just got to be so inspiring to be just surrounded by, you know, all of that wild and then your deer comes to visit you every morning. I mean, it's pretty
Mhm.
great. Um, okay, I am going to bring all three of you back. And this is the part I really enjoy, is turning the talk over to you three. And if you have questions for each other or comments, please go ahead and ask. And also, if you are out there listening and if you have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat and I'll read those. But yeah, artists, have at it.
Well, I was going to talk about Ilsa's work. Um, you know, the one of the cow in the boat and the little bird, when you look at that, you would think at first that, wow, this is a really precarious situation. You know, this cow is adrift in this vast expanse, but you don't get that feeling of fear or terror. It's just more of this calmness. And I think that that really comes through in a lot of your work is that, wow, this could be a really bad thing here, but it's not, you know? So there's this really cool twist of emotions that I think that happens there. So bravo.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love the painterly quality too of your work, Elsa.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a bit of a change, hasn't it, Elsa?
I think that, you know, some people will have said, I don't know what it is about your work, but something's changed over the years. And I think it's that I've always used well, I'm using more color in my work now. And I'm also using more color harmony, I think, and really learning how colors work together. And, you know, the shadows and not real heavy light and shadow, like my colors, everything's a little more flat and I mean, there's form and shape, but just the subtle color shifts between things is something that I'm really trying to be more aware of. And I think that makes a painting more rich and, you know, if you come up to a painting, you can see these little nuances, and that's what I've been doing. And it's been really fun because it's finally, sometimes when I'm painting recently, I'm like, oh my God, I'm finally starting to understand that. And it's taken years, you know, and I feel like I'm not even near done, of course, but it's nice to have something click and then work with that. So that, I think that's what you're saying.
Nice.
And David, I love the romance of your work. It's just,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know, I was expecting that question from Rose, is like, where does this stuff come from? And, you know, I thought about that for a long time, and I have this half-baked idea that it's from road trips you take as a kid. And you go down Route 66 and you see this sort of commercialized version of the West, you know, and the motels and the diners and, you know, the gas stations. You know, they have motels that are shaped like teepees, and the diners are called Dave's Chuck Wagon Diner or something, like the one on West Colfax, you know. And it creates this sort of romantic, feel-good version, idealized version of the West. And, you know, as a kid, probably everybody else, get in the car, you drive to Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon or wherever, and you'd see all of this stuff. It's not really the West, but it's like a graphic artist's interpretation of the West, and it gives it this idealized romantic sense. So I think a lot of that kind of gets baked into my work. And people have said, why don't you do something other than cowboys? You know, why don't you do like just Americans, you know, from past generations? And I thought, well, that could be interesting, but I would kind of lose like the foundation of it all too, you know, because I think the cowboys are like an American icon. You know, it's like a cultural export that America has.
Mhm. I think you have such a great design sense, of course. I'm always impressed with, I mean, of course, your background too, where you started, that has something to do with it, but such a great eye with how it all comes together in design.
Well, thank you.
And Diana, I think sorry, cut you off. Your deer is great. I love that piece.
thank you. Thank you.
Like Rose, you were saying too, that I think it's a elevated piece. It's really like something about it really works so well, and the shapes and the harmony in it is wonderful too.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
So we have a comment from Joni Beckner. Thank you for this. It's always such a wonderful, inspiring experience to hear from artists. Thank you all for sharing your processes, thoughts, and work. I agree. It's really inspiring to hear your stories and where this work is coming from. And my big takeaway is that y'all are just a bunch of big kids. Like,
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. So anyway, yeah, you all are my final talk for this season. I'd love to let everybody know that the show is January 3rd, the red carpet. And I know these three will be here. I think, Diana, you're coming over, yeah? Yes, so lots of artists. I think 60 plus artists will be at the show this year. So very excited. Yeah, very excited to see you all. After the 3rd, we do a complete rehang, and a lot of art goes home that sells. So if you can come on the 3rd, you'll get to see everything. After the 3rd, then we do that rehang. We open on the 8th, and we'll be open through the 22nd during the stock show. So lots of opportunity to come see this work in person. It's all really great stuff. So Happy holidays, everybody. Diana, David, and Elsa, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Rose.
Rose, for the opportunity. This is great.
Mhm.
Absolutely. You all take care and stay warm.
Yeah,
Right.
Sure.
big
Mhm.
issue.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.